bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go.
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go. It is a non-football Friday here on Birds 365. First one we've had of those in a while. You got your Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald, here with you for the next 2 hours. A couple of good guests coming your way. Johnny Mac, we mentioned the stages of grief yesterday. Don't know if closure is one of them. I don't think so. Acceptance, closure.
Acceptance, yeah.
Right.
No closure.
No closure. So I did, because that's the word I wanted to ask you about today was closure. Yesterday, we got to hear from both Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman in a joint interview, not separate, which I would have preferred, but that's just me. I'm a picky guy. And they answered a lot of questions about how the season ended and where we go from here. So there was a sense of closure to the 2022 football season after their loss in Super Bowl 57. Did you get that? Did you feel any closure after hearing from the head coach and the general manager?
Well, I think it was different. So it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Those are the 5 stages. I felt Howie was at 4. I felt he was depressed, to be honest. And I felt Nick was at 5. I think Nick has accepted it and moved on. In a lot of ways, I one of the amazing things about football coaches is their optimism. They have to be optimistic. They have to be. You can't be a pessimistic person. I'm a very cynical person. I think most journalists are.
Well,
Can't.
Time out. And then there's Belichick. What the hell do you call him?
He's optimistic. He
hides it well. If that's the case, he does a hell of a job.
One of the things your buddies with Gary Myers. One of the stories he always tells is when he got to sit next to Belichick. Same thing with Andy Reid. They have this in front of the camera mentality, and then everybody gets to know them behind the scenes. That guy's got a good sense of humor. That guy's got. You got to be incredibly optimistic to be a football coach. Even the hard-nosed guys, you want to go back to the Bill Parcells of the world. Again, there's certain instances where they get angry at a player and they might call him she or something like that. But, you have to go through this grind each and every day. You have to get each and every player better. It doesn't matter. One season you might have great personnel like this season for the Eagles. Next season you might have lesser personnel. You still got to go to work. You still got to make the best of it. So they're all now. Nick wears it on his sleeve. He's obviously optimistic where somebody like Bill doesn't. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he's farther along. Howie looked depressed, man. He really did. He looked depressed.
He looked.
They know. They missed a golden opportunity. They understand that.
How he looks scarred, because that was the word he chose to describe the team and himself, that yes, he was scarred by that loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. But we did learn a lot from the press conference. It was, I know you told me during the week, you thought you were going to hear from Howie, not necessarily Nick, and they came out in tandem. it was much more of a Nick Sirianni press conference than a Howie Roseman press conference. Some of that is dictated by you guys asking the questions. Were you as surprised that it was as lopsided as it was?
No, because remember, you don't get to talk to the head coach. Typically, you have the post-game press conference during the regular season, which you had at the Super Bowl, but you don't get a lot of information from that because hasn't watched the film, hasn't, and they kind of lean, well, I haven't seen the film. I got to watch the film. And then, you get them the next day when they've watched it and you get more concrete answers to things. So with the Super Bowl, you didn't get that second one. So you wanted to get some answers about the question. But the other part of that was Howie had already spoken to us behind the scenes, and he wasn't going to get into a lot of off-season stuff until the combine. So we knew that as well. So, you can waste time or you can try to go different directions.
Yeah,
so
but
part of it was
here's where I would disagree with that, and perfect yesterday with him being available. If they hadn't lost their offensive coordinator and their defense coordinator, I'd buy what you're saying. Listen, he's not going to say anything about the offseason until he gets to the combine. Fine, you can almost get away with that.
well,
When
I
you
meant
have
more
two main
personnel.
coaches decide to go elsewhere and take other jobs. And oh, by the way, some things we found out yesterday about how hands-on the general manager was in the hiring of the last staff. Well,
Yes, by the way.
exactly.
Yeah, I need my apologies from a lot of
I
listeners.
was on that in a second,
Yeah.
but let me finish the point. Howie and Jeffrey like to be involved, if not call the
Yeah.
shots on the coaching staff. So now that two guys have walked out the door and gotten head coaching jobs, yeah, Howie Roseman needs to be questioned. He can't just say, yeah, catch me at the combine. Then I'll start giving you guys.
No,
some
and he was
information
asked about the
offseason.
assistants. He was asked about the assistants. Look, last time I think, they were very hands-on with Doug. We all know they were too hands-on. I think, I don't know if everybody knows that, but a lot of people think they were too hands-on. I think, because the last hire, Nick, was such a strange process. Look at all the processes this year, Arizona being the last. It's kind of normal. It's kind of normal. That season, remember, the Eagles were planning on running it back with Doug Peterson. Jeffrey Lurie just wanted to approve his plan and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, he didn't like Doug's plan for the coaching staff. And then he was fired very late. Not typically you're fired, right after the season. Sometimes before the season ends and you have interim coaches. So it was very late. And they were behind the 8 ball. They wanted to talk to Robert Saleh, but he was already along with the Jets, and pretty much it was a fait accompli, and Arthur Smith, and he was already along with 10. Those were the hot candidates at the time, and they got a late start. They weren't able to get involved with them. Then they kind of said, oh, maybe it's going to be Josh McDaniels. He's going to be the guy. Thank God he wasn't. And that's where they got Jonathan Gannon. They got to meet Jonathan Gannon because he's very close with Josh McDaniels. And they said, well, this guy's going to be our coordinator, our defensive coordinator. They really liked him. I didn't even know. They decided Shane Steichen was going to be the offensive coordinator before they decided that Nick Sirianni was going to be the head coach. That was even new to me. I knew it about Gannon. I didn't know about Steichen. So it was a very weird process, and it worked out in the end. So nobody's got it. They're never going to do that process again. Ultimately, maybe the tail is wagging the dog in the essence of, all right, we got Gannon, we got Steichen. Let's get somebody who's familiar with them. Maybe that helped Nick. I think everyone assumed, oh, Nick's here, so he's got a history with Shane Steichen. He's got a history with Jonathan Gannon. I said it for the longest time. It had nothing to do with Gannon. Gannon was going to be the DC no matter who they decided was going to be the head coach. and turns out Steichen as well. So maybe it was the other way around. And typically that's not the way you want to go about things. But remember, Nick didn't have a lot of power at the time. That was his only interview, was really underneath the radar. Now, 2 years later, it looks like a phenomenal move, but that's probably not the way you want to go about it, to be honest. It worked out, but that's a bad process.
I like the way you use the phrase "the tail walking the dog" because that's the way that it kind of played. But it did. Sometimes that works out phenomenally, and I would stay away from using never. You and I maybe never. We're not going to be around long enough, but you never know what's going to happen. This could come to fruition. And shoot, it did work. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles went back down this road again of hiring coordinators before the head coach. Not the way it's usually
Well, I mean,
done
the whole process. I mean, even going back to Doug, firing somebody that late to put yourself in that kind of, it's never going to happen again. I mean, if it does, something went drastically wrong. And I think the Eagles know that's probably not the best process, but it would have to be a young coach who doesn't have a lot of cachet, and that was Nick at the time. And here we are, and now all of a sudden he's got a lot of cachet, and he does. You know, he's become the it guy. I said it the other day, whether people realize it or not, he has overtaken Sean McVay as the it guy. Oh, you want to coach? Let's go look at Nick's stat. And, you know, that means you get to put your foot down a little bit more. And we'll see how that shakes out in the coming days and weeks and months and years, hopefully.
And the way that Sirianni, but maybe he is a good actor because, yes, you're right. He came off as a guy who had gotten to the acceptance level. I hope he's a good actor in front of the cameras and maybe a little bit different behind the scenes. The thing that I thought was most telling, at least is going to have the biggest effect for next year that we got from yesterday's press conference is, despite them not being ready to officially announce that they're elevating someone to the offensive coordinator from their own pre-existing staff, Brian Johnson, whoever they choose as their next offense coordinator, Nick Sirianni plans on making sure that they're calling the plays, that he is going to buy into the John McMullen CEO coaches are the best coaches in the National Football League mindset, that it hasn't bothered him. He hasn't been calling plays. Certainly, we speculated here on Birds when we knew that Steichen was going to be out the door, that Nick may at least consider going back to calling plays, taking that responsibility on. He told us without much hesitation yesterday, that's not the case. He likes the way he is a head coach in the National Football League now and has no intention of going back to calling plays.
Yeah, and I think it says two things. It says, well, one, I mean, obviously he understands the tremendous success. I mean, they were 22-7. I did the math since Shane Steichen took over as the play caller. So, you know, it worked out pretty well. Now, I think Shane's a really good play caller. So we have to wait and see what Brian Johnson, but I think the bigger part is that's a clear indication Brian Johnson's getting the job. And if it's not Brian Johnson, it's going to be Kevin Patullo, because Nick wouldn't be saying, I'm not going to call the plays to somebody he doesn't know, you know, and somebody's bringing in off the street. So I think there's two layers to that. Not that we already didn't know, but yeah, Brian Johnson's going to be the next offensive coordinator, and he's comfortable enough that he's going to allow him to call plays. And I think that's a good thing. Now, is he going to be as good as Shane at it? I really like Shane Steichen as play caller because I've gotten to talk to him a lot, and just this whole philosophy of, you know, he's kind of egoless. He doesn't, you know, care about looking good. He doesn't, you know, you can't stop this. I'm going to do this. And, you know, and it sounds like common sense, but it isn't common sense with these guys. It really isn't. And, you know, nobody's going to know that Brian's called plays in college at Utah, Houston, helped out at Florida with Dan Mullen. So he's got a lot of experience at the college level calling plays, and he played quarterback for those who don't know. He's a really good college quarterback. And hopefully it works out, but, you know, when you lose good coordinators, it tends to be a little bit of a learning curve. You know, you're not going to hit the ground running. There's going to be some growing pains.
And you talked about Nick Sirianni and his meteoric rise. 2 years ago was Nick who? Wait, who are the Eagles hiring as their head coach? Who is Nick Sirianni? Well, 2 years later, he's a rainmaker and getting guys other gigs around the National Football League. You could say the same thing about Shane Steichen, that when the Eagles hired him, and we found out yesterday that they hired him before they hired the head coach. Kind of a surprise, but when they did, people were like, Shane Steichen, really? He's got play caller? He's going to be offensive coordinator? Or Sirianni's going to call the plays, but he's our offensive coordinator. Why do we even need this Steichen guy? And now, as you just stated, he's one of the more respected play callers in the entire National Football League. And just 2 years after being in the who is Shane Steichen category, he's now the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. So, yeah, the Eagles have become an organization that the rest of the National Football League respects and is ready to turn their organization over on big job placement to guys who scratched their surface here in Philadelphia. All right, the other thing that Nick talked about yesterday, and we'll get to this for just a couple minutes before we punch up our first guest, our buddy Chris Franklin. First question, why didn't you go for it on fourth down? Nothing like cutting straight to the chase to I would suggest one of the more debatable topics since the game was over and done with. You and I talked about it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as well, that I didn't think he should have gone for it then. I think
I didn't, it was funny because Nick brought up Bob Lang, the Eagles PR guy who prepared him for the question. And he said, yeah, I didn't even think it was an issue until Bob prepared me. And I agreed with him. Like, I didn't even know it was an issue. Like watching, it's 4th and 3 or 32. You got to punt the football. Now, if it's 4th and 1 and you can do the tush push like they did against San Francisco, that's fine. But 4th and 3 is not 4th and 1. You can't do the tush push. So, you got to punt the football. I've heard so many, like the defense was playing poorly. And I had a couple fans say, well, they're just going to score anyway if you punt it, so you might as well go for it. You can't coach a football team assuming, my defense is – so they're going to give up a touchdown every single time. I mean, come on. That's not – I'm 100% with Nick. That's not even an issue. That's not even an issue. 4th and 3, their aggressiveness brings this up in people's minds.
Right.
But they're successful with their aggressiveness because generally they're not stupid with their aggressiveness. So that's how I would describe that.
They don't take bad percentage chances, and that would have been a bad percentage chance. And again, I can't speak for everyone who is second guessing and go, he should have gone for it. It's real easy to say after they return to punt 65 yards to the 5-yard line that, how did you not go for it there yet? When the ball's coming off the punter's foot, Shankopotamus, wrong side of the field, then it gets real easy to second guess. But I like the fact that he went 32 out of 32 coaches in the National Football League are probably punting the ball there. He addressed that early. We're going to address plenty for you here on Birds 365 today. Got two solid Eagle guests coming your way. Our usual Monday guy after the fact. We're a little late to get to him this week.
A lot of travel, a lot of issues this week coming back from Phoenix. Yeah, I think I'm still jet lagged.
He's looking okay for non-jet lag. Franklin's in there waving, shaking his head in the waiting room. Chris Franklin from NJ.com is going to jump aboard with us coming up in just a couple of minutes. A little later, Les Bowen, longtime Eagle beat writer, is going to be on with us. Lots of Eagle stuff going forward with yesterday's Sirianni and Howie Roseman media availability. We'll break it all down for you. Chris Franklin first, Les Bowen a little later, right here on Birds 365.
Philadelphia fans. We're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Go for the beers, go for the cheers, go for the hit and the hits, go for the scene, go for the screens, go for the gallery, go for the win, go to Ocean.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
My name is Fran Soleno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Mac guys here with you on Birds 365. McMullen, McDonald, and McFranklin. We'll bring them into the Mac Club for us today. Our Franklin from NJ.com jumping on board with us. Glad you made it back from Arizona safe and sound. Johnny Mac says tough sledding for all you guys, but you're back here in the Delaware Valley. That's all that matters. Here's why I want to start with you today, Chris, since way too much of what we talk about these days has to involve gambling. And guilty as charged. I got my wagers that I put in on the Super Bowl and lost money because most of them were tied to the Eagles winning the game. What kind of odds would you have needed to bet on Harrison Butker missing that 27-yard field goal at the end of the game, that he could go doink off the upright again? How heavy would the odds have been needed for you to go, yeah, the Eagles are going to dodge his bullet here. He's going to miss a 27-yarder.
I think for me, I'm a big fan of The Office. So when they said if it had to be 10,000 to 1 odds, I need to see 10,000 once. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, then he gets that one too. Then he'll go that. But otherwise, it's like
Harrison Butker. That'd be a Blair Walsh. But the Blair Walsh that was about a 27-yard, somewhere in that range. But that was really bad weather. So yeah, the Eagles were in trouble. Well, I guess we'll start with the game since we got to get that out of the way. 4th and 3. That was the first question Nick got. I didn't even think about it. I like Nick's explanation. Like Bob Lang had to, make him aware that question was probably coming. He would have had to have made me aware if people were advising me on Burst 365. Like, why is this an issue? Just because of the results? Because you can't go for it on 4th and 3 at your own 32 in the Super Bowl. And this is one of the most aggressive teams. He said 32 out of 32 NFL coaches would have punted that football. I agree with him.
I would, between that 4th and 3, the things I heard between a 4th and 3 and also kicking a field goal instead of trying to go for it down late when you're late, kicking a field goal instead of trying to go for it.
4th and 6, by the way?
Yeah, it's from like those. I'm like, nah, you can't do that because even though this team, the field position, and then you just giving them I just don't get why.
Because they gave them field position because they can't cover a punt. Well, Aaron Cepas is a bad punt, but that's hindsight. Obviously, you're not going to, we're going to give up a 65-yard punt return. Well, yeah, if you give me that information, yeah, I'll try to go for it. Might as well.
Yeah, I think it's a lot going now that because of the result that we've seen happen because they lost because we're sitting here now for I don't know, was it February? So 5 months before we see training camp, 5, 6 months before we see training camp, and it's just going to sit there and like, all right, we need to find something where it is the what ifs things, and I neither situation. I think I have no problem with either situation, and they decided to punt it, and we did there. It's I don't know. I wish I knew like why.
Sounds like 35 out of 35. We can add Jody Mack, me, Chris Frank.
There you go.
And I don't even have the analytics.
35 exactly right. All right. We went off on a punting jag. The coach was asked yesterday about Michael Clay's status. Definitive or defensive? Because there was no doubt left. It wasn't hemming and hawing or hedging. He basically came out and declared that Michael Clay is in good stead after having what I would suggest would be back-to-back poor years as a special teams coach, or the performance of his special teams have been poor. What did you make of the definitiveness that the coach used in describing Michael Clay and his special team status?
I was a little shocked, honestly. I know head coaches, they value their assistants almost like the kids or other extended family members, and even though
Carson Walsh,
yeah, like that way too. And the next thing you know, a couple of days later, they're going like, "Wait, what?" Even though it was fired from my head of Doug and all that stuff. But yeah, I just don't see. I probably would have. I wouldn't have been that definitive. I may have used back channels to just ask around. Probably would have gotten back to Michael. It probably would have. But at the same time, it's like realizing, hey, you know what? This is your last. Even if it didn't go with another guy, this is your last chance. You have to continue to show steady improvement, because if not, you have to move forward. And earlier this year, did they improve? Yeah, they did improve over the course of the year. But they went from the 30, especially PFF. I think they went from 32 all the way up to 29, which is yeah. But when you look at the coverage teams, I know they had a lot of young guys. You guys like Kyron, Johnson, you had Ellis, you had all those other younger guys that are still part of the team, and they grew into the roles. But here again, like, are you going to use? Are a lot of those guys still going to be back next year, because you're going to have a new crop of rookies coming in, and teams going to look different as well too. So I don't know. I probably wouldn't have been as steadfast as I was when it came to that.
All right, I'm gonna defend Michael Clay, and here's why I'm gonna defend Michael Clay. One, he's a nice guy, but
yeah.
Even more so, and I can't judge him as a coach, but I do know from watching this team over the years, they placed a lot at one time. They placed a lot of emphasis on special teams, and I always bring up Chris Maragos, who, by the way, is a rich man.
Oh, yeah.
At least that settlement holds up. Brian Brayman, people bring up a lot. Players like that. In the Dave Pipp era, they always seem to keep one or two slots for, really good special teams players. But if they have to play defense or offense, you're going to be in trouble. But they understood the value of special teams. And even going back to Super Bowl 52, when we said, all right, who's the better team? One of the big advantages is Super Bowl 52 versus Super Bowl 57. They had Donnie Jones, who at the end of his career, but man, that guy knew how to punt, knew what to do. You're not going to have, coverage going one way and the punt going the other way with Donnie Jones. They valued. Now, Howie Roseman deserves all the flowers for putting together this roster. Did a phenomenal job, but he went with young players on special teams. Your gunners are Zach McPherson and Josh Jobe. Your punt returners, Britton Kobe. They didn't get a kickoff returner. Boston did a nice job after they realized Quez can do it again. And Britton didn't have the long speed. And then you have Aaron Cepas, a young punter who they're trying to turn into, they should have kept Cam Johnston. The one part we always talk about personnel of this team, and everyone says Jonathan Gannon stinks. It's all the personnel. Well, then you can't say Michael Clay stinks because he didn't have the personnel.
See, part of me thinks that in order to get some of those free agents that they did, they had to sacrifice somewhere.
Yeah.
So you had
that's
to
what I
use a
mean.
lot of that younger talent and able to do that. And I think when you look at when you look at some of these guys, the one thing when you look at the billing was Kyron Johnson was built as this guy who was going to be a great special teamer when he came in the draft. So you banked on that. The latter part of the year, you lost Sean Bradley with a wrist injury. He was part of that core special teams when you had that. And you look at some of those other Reed Blankenship, when he started playing more defense, you didn't use him as much as you did there. So you start, and it's funny because it's inverted. Like you didn't have as many pieces, and then the coverage got better. But the one thing that the one area I think everybody kept saying there was a concern even going into the season was Aaron Siposs, and I didn't address that at all. And it's one of those things where it's a joke, but you kind of do wonder now. Is they were trying to work, they were working Siposs back, and they were trying to work him back, and you finally deactivated him. But I wonder how he was obviously rusty. He doesn't do any game stuff. Should they have gone with Brett Kern? Because at least he was in the flow.
They should have. And hindsight, they should have went with Brett Kern. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They're probably kicking themselves a little bit. But you bring up some of those names, and you're right with Sean. Sean Bradley's one of their better special teams player getting injured. And who else did you mention? I forget.
Kyron. He was
Kyron as a rookie. But again, Chris Maragos, he was in the conversation for 5 years for being the best special teams player in the NFL. They don't have that guy. And they used to make it their business to try to find that guy. Even when they had Rudy Ford when he was healthy. Rudy Ford was phenomenal. He's one of the best gunners I've ever seen. And he actually played pretty well at safety for the Packers this season. But he was always hurt.
Let me take a shot at defending Howie on this. Who is the Chris Maragos in the National Football League today, John?
Yeah, that's Howie's job. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Because
but there are better guys.
It's a league-wide thing. It's kind of like relief pitching in baseball. Over time, it just became, we're now going to use a 13-man staff rather than a 10-man staff. We're not going to have starters pitching into the ninth inning. Well, guess what? We don't have room on our roster for specialized special team players because we need 6 backup defensive tackles. That there has been an emphasis switched in the same roster size. They haven't added roster space, that you need those situational substitution guys to be able to go into the games. So therefore, they just don't have room for a superstar special
but they
teams
used
guy.
to make room. That's what I'm saying. They used to make room. They used to be one of those
philosophy of
teams.
roster building in the National Football League has changed, John. When did the Eagles ever have 7 defensive tackles up on a given Sunday? They just don't. And now they do because that's what they like. They like to have the just continually changing guys on the defensive line, and that takes away from a super special teams guy.
I think a lot of those guys.
You can disagree with the philosophy, but that's what their philosophy was this year.
I think a lot of times too, when they look at it, they're hoping that a lot of these younger athletic guys, when I try to develop, at least try to get them some things. And I think that maybe that's the thing. Maybe when you look at some of these, the athleticism of some of these guys, when you look at the quick speed, some of these guys and decision making, maybe you got to burn like one of those comp picks they may have 4th, 5th round on a guy who you know is going to take about 2 or 3 years to develop into a potential starter, a reliable starter. But you say, hey, you know what? This guy could be something, like not calling the person like he had to get like Trotter, but like remember he said that first year when he's at Boston. Maybe you get a guy who you see potential in them who can really be that, because I think we all agree Nakobe Dean's not going to be a special teamer his whole entire time during his tenure here. Maybe you get a guy like that to try to develop into that, at least so you have that, so on a cheap or a cheap contract that you can just use in there and throw in there. Hey, you know what?
Yeah,
this is our guy.
I don't know if anybody's a special teams expert, to be honest, because everybody kind of just but those guys should be, and they know because they've done it before. And I think what you're saying, Jody, I think it's got more to do with the money. Like if you have somebody like Maragos who's playing for 7-8 years, you're up to $2-3 million. You got to pay that guy significant money when you start talking. Whereas you got to pay Kyron Johnson a rookie deal, and you say. But one thing, if you remember, way back in training camp, and we're getting too deep in the weeds on special teams. But what the hell? It's the off season. Birds 365. Remember, Michael said there's so much difference between special teams in the NFL and college. So just because you were a good special teams player in college doesn't mean it's going to translate. And he was kind of shitting on Kyron a little bit because he wasn't ready. I don't know, man. I think they're going to learn from that mistake because when Phipp and Chip were here, and then Phipp obviously stayed, they paid more attention to special teams. That's why I'm defending Michael Clay a little bit, because I just didn't think they had the personnel.
And I'll stick to the way rosters have been built in the National Football League has changed, and it's a tougher job. Maybe that's why they're defending Michael Clay, because they know it's a tougher job because they're not allocating resources the way that they used to. But yeah, I don't see Howie changing and saying, yeah, let me get 2 specific guys, and they're all I'm going to expect them to do is to play special teams. All right, special teams aside, the Eagles came up short in the Super Bowl. They lost to a Hall of Fame coach and a Hall of Fame quarterback. But the defense didn't get the job done in the second half. And despite that, the fact, Jonathan Gannon got a job as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. And I took some calls on Monday and Tuesday night about him slinking out of town and not facing the music here in Philadelphia. Well, he talked about Philly, talked up Philly a lot yesterday in his press conference as the new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Last game, Jonathan Gannon's defense here in Philadelphia. About what you expected, major letdown. He was again, Sirianni said yesterday on one of those 2 touchdowns down by the goal line, he had no execution. In other words, player's fault. We had him in the right place. The player just made a mistake. The other one said that they got out schemed by Andy Reid. How would you describe the Eagles defense in the Super Bowl, Chris?
I probably put 60% of the blame on Gannon, and I probably put 40% of the blame on players. I think it was when you look at some of the calls at certain times. Like, I'm a proponent. I have no problem with you blitzing Mahomes at certain points. I don't think you need to send 7. I think you could have gotten home with 6 a couple times, but you saw what happened. He just was wide open and then waltzed in for a touchdown. I think a lot. Also, I look at some of the adjustments they were trying to do when he saw they were trying to use the run a little bit more. I thought I probably would have maybe played Linval Joseph a little bit more instead of Jordan Davis, because I mean, just overall that interior defensive line didn't play its best. The defensive line obviously didn't play well because they had 0 sacks, and I know some guys say we're slipping and everything. But when you look at overall interior line play, there's too many times they're running themselves out or twisting themselves out of position, and then they got so many yards in the middle of the field. So I do see the game plan for me a little bit. I wasn't the biggest fan of, but then I still think some of those players they could have played a little bit better as well too. And I know saying, well, we felt like we were playing a winter class, like they were playing a winter classic all of a sudden in Arizona, but it didn't. It still should have made some adjustments in that aspect too. But
by the way, props to Howie Roseman for not even going down that road. He got asked the question about the field, and all he said was both teams played on the same field. Yeah. He said it twice. So I give him credit for that. Now, maybe because he's going to get fined. I don't know. But I like the fact that he said that. Yeah, here's one thing, and I'm sure you saw this, Chris. I don't know if you saw it, Jody, but NFL Films put up the Sky Moore touchdown, and everybody a bunch of guys were mic'd up. Andy didn't out-scheme anybody because they didn't run the stinking play correctly. They were completely Keystone Cops, wrong formation. Patrick Mahomes was able to save it and get Sky Moore going in the proper direction. So that's why I'm not blaming that. Now, I think what you said, which is ironic because of all the fans crapping on JG, didn't change, doesn't do adjustments. I think the exact opposite. Why the hell is he blitzing what he doesn't blitz all year? Why is he playing so much man coverage what he doesn't play man coverage all year? And then you get guys blowing their responsibilities. That's the problem I have with JG. What the hell? Why you talk all year? Oh, Everything's the same. Nothing changes. Everything changed. Why?
I think it's one of the things where you knew you had Andy Reid was going to study that defense for 2 weeks, and you know that we all know how Andy does when he has extra time to look and prepare for a team. So you had to throw something at him that he wasn't going to be expecting, and we know again it was mostly passive. Even though the Eagles were about, I think it was like they're ranked 16th or 17th, something like that, in amount of blitzes this year. It still wasn't along like say the Cardinals or Giants where they were blitzing like, hey, it's a snap. Send everybody there. But he's probably figured, you know what? He's probably thinking I'm going to sit down and be passive, and even from the tape from last year. So he figured, why not just do it again? So I don't blame him for that aspect. I think most of the guys, I think Slay and some of the other guys are better man cover guys in zone. I think they prefer playing man a little bit more. So yeah, I got no problem with that.
Well,
I just didn't think the timing of some of those lists was like,
and Slay's a great press coverage corner when he's covering the guy he's supposed to cover.
Right.
When he's not so good. And James, we all know, is a better zone corner. So I don't know. You go 16-1 with the quarterback up to that point. I'm not changing a lot, but that's me. And they changed too much.
The quarterback's on offense. I'm with Chris on this one. You needed to throw some wrinkles in there for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Blitz, I don't know if that's where I would gone because Mahomes is the best against the blitz quarterback in the National Football League, but man-to-man on the outside. And, yeah, I think the corners kind of let him down a little bit. All right, staying with the defense, moving forward. Yesterday, Nick Sirianni said he's open-minded to potentially changing some things on scheme. He has his core values, and that's going to stay the same, but they're not married to just hiring someone or advancing someone within the staff who is just going to keep the defense in place the way that it is right now. You buying what he was selling, that he's open-minded to change, or do you think he was just saying that yesterday because they're not ready to hire someone defensively and they've got to keep an open mind, at least as with a public face on it?
I think they're trying. I think it's a good way to try to see what other defensive coordinators are doing. I think both coordinator spots are going to be in-house. I think Denard Wilson's going to wind up being the guy when all is said and done. But I think when you look at it's a chance to see what other defenses are doing. You bring in Vance Joseph, see what man schemes he's using, see what blitzes he's using, put it on tape, maybe record that interview and say, okay, we know we got this, build the book for what he does this way, and just continue to bring other guys and just see that. But I think it's and for theirs, I hope it. And the reason why I asked what the timeline is because I think they have to get something sooner than later because you got the combine coming up, and you need to find you want to have your defensive coordinators input in that room when you're asking these prospects questions about scheme and so they can get a good thing to do it. So I don't think it's going to be. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they rush. It's thorough in the sense that they got and then I keep bringing up Jamal Singleton example of 9 times, 10 times. So I can see in the next week they talk to 9, 10 guys, but they finally decide hey, you know what? Yeah, Denard's our guy, or maybe even Nick Rallis. But I just think it's trending more to Denard. But it's just a chance to go and see what everybody around the league's doing defensively and pick brains and do that. I'd do that if I was him, try to collect.
Yeah, it sure sounded like Chris. By the way, Nick was talking. I think he said in-house 3-4 times. I mean, we all kind of know Brian Johnson's going to be the offensive coordinator, but I think the DC's a little bit more uncertainty at least. But it sure looks like, we're up to Nick. It'd be Denard Wilson. So if it's not Denard Wilson, does that tell us, Howie and Jeffrey are getting involved?
I wouldn't put it past it. I wouldn't put it past it, but I think especially when they added they gave Denard more responsibility. I think it was a little thing to say, hey, let's see how he handles it. And we saw the pass defense it was the best in the league. I don't know. I think it might be one of those things where they actually trust Nick a little bit more. Personally, I think maybe let him still do his staff, do most of his staff, and have say over that. I think he's proven that way. I mean, you can say that Doug proved it that way, so he won the Super Bowl. We're doing that, but
you would think,
and for it, but I don't know. See, I don't think it's going to go unless it's somebody who's connected and And I got to go down deep in the weeds when looking like see who's agents who and who was a favor, whatever. But
because Vance Joseph, let's be because he's the first name that's been floated, but Vance is a heck of a lot sexier than Denard Wilson. So do they fall for that trap?
That's why I asked the question the way I did. Nick did say he's open-minded to changing the way that the Eagles play defense. And Vance Joseph is much more well-known for blitzing and man-to-man coverage, which the Eagles didn't do a lot of this year. So do you buy it, or do you think that was just window dressing?
I think it's part of window dressing. Also, I thought as well, too, that he said that, he was, when it comes to not giving up big plays and explosiveness and everything else like that. And when you go man-to-man, you blitz, and you get the right quarterback to know, like, if you get Mahomes to do that or you get somebody else, yeah, you're going to get burnt that way, too. And next thing you know, you're looking back and you see a receiver running 30, 40 yards, continue to run down the field. So I think the blitz just opens you up more than that. So I think you'll see somebody who's more apt to play in those cover 3 zone, the cover 3 to cover 4s, just make you methodically go down the field. So that's why I think the Joseph one, I mean, I can be completely wrong, but that's why I'm like the Joseph one. I was like, I don't know about that. It's just forgive off what they were saying and everything else.
One more coordinator hire question. At least this is my perception, and if I'm wrong, please, both you guys who know better than me, correct me. Part of the advancement of their offense coordinator, Brian Johnson, is if you don't hire him, somebody else is gonna. If you don't make him an offensive coordinator, someone else is. He's already gone out and interviewed for other offensive coordinator jobs. So you're not only not giving the guy the job, but you're losing him too because he's walking out the door. Is that the same with Denard Wilson with Jonathan Gannon, who went so far as to call Wilson his right-hand man? Now we know Vance Joseph, it's kind of inbred here, is the DC in Arizona as of right now, but they could move on from him very easily if that's what Gannon wanted. Would he hire Wilson as his defensive coordinator if the Eagles don't elevate him?
Yeah, I could see that as well too. Because Denard, I think with the Cleveland Brown, his name is starting to get out there a little bit more. He's starting to get more and more cachet as well too. And I think people are really starting to see like, hey, especially when you have the numbers that they did. Granted, you could say it was either the secondary, you could say it's the pass rush, what have you. When you have the numbers that they did allow against the pass and the way the success they had on defense this year, you start to look at that whole entire staff and say, okay, what can I bring those elements in there? Who's a young guy who can command respect for the players to bring in? And so, yeah, I think you can see him going out there. I think a lot of the other ones do that. Pretty much, I think that's the only spot I think he can go out there, at least this cycle now with most of them being filled and everything else. But yeah, I can see that. Yeah, between him, I can see him. You lose that one. I'm also wondering if you lose Patullo. I don't know. I think he's going to be a hot name eventually that one too. So you're going to lose a lot of people off of the staff.
It's interesting, and I have no proof of this, but Nick joked, earlier when we talked with him, that can't have anybody. When we asked him about JG potentially leaving, Shane potentially leaving, and taking coaches, he said he told him he can't have anybody. I do think there's a sort of personal relationship where you say, all right, I'm not gonna push it. And the Cardinals are interviewing Dave Borgonzi for their defensive coordinator job. And he worked with Gannon in Indy, and he's interviewing Drew Petzig to be the offensive coordinator who worked with him in Minnesota. So I think there's like a wink between Gannon and Steichen and the Eagles and saying, maybe they'll give him one. Maybe he'll give Gannon, Nick Rallis. Patullo's a little bit different because you can't block a guy from being a coordinator anymore. You used to be able to block guys, but so maybe Patullo, but I don't think we're going to see those two guys pilfer the Eagles coaching staff. I think they have too much respect for Nick, and I think they said, all right, maybe we'll give you one.
I think so too, but I'm selfish now. I want to see if somebody takes that, what's going to happen at the league meetings when you see the coach's picture, and they stand next to each other. There's one trying to punch the other, and then the rip or something like that. They're like, thanks for taking them. I told you not to take them. I just kind of want to see that when it happens personally. But
JG, most of us, I don't know, everybody around the league. I mean, you heard the whispers in Phoenix, Chris. He was getting the Arizona job, unless Bill Bidwell came in blew everything up, which is always a possibility. But JG went up there yesterday and said, "Oh, I didn't know until after the game." And Howie told me Arizona wanted. Why do these coaches go down this route with that nonsense? It gets off on a bad foot.
No, I saw I was in the locker room. They were both walking out. They were like they're fine. So that's when I heard that. I was like, unless how he's like some gangster that we don't know, say you're going to go out there, you're going to smile when you're walking out, you're act like everything's okay. And then that one too. No, they were walking out fine from what I saw on that one too. So I'm like, if somebody told me, yeah, you're going to take this job, I don't know, maybe it was one of those things where he said, hey, I got a request from the Cardinals to speak for you to speak from that way too. I could see that, but the whole, well, I didn't know until this one.
Stick in the league knew he was getting the job, but JG didn't know.
Yeah, it is just, I don't know.
All right, let me bring it back to Howie, who yesterday, John said, looked depressed up there on the riser. Not a bad way. I said he looked scarred. It was probably a combination of those two. He's got to start to line his dominoes up. And he was asked all the prerequisite questions. He didn't give great answers. He didn't have to give great answers. He could just say, we will be proceeding and the like. The first thing has to be Jalen Hurts, right? Before anything else, you need to put it there. There needs to be a domino effect. And the first domino's got to fall. It's got to be the biggest domino of all. And that's Jalen Hurts. Free agency is like second week of March 13th, I think, is legal tampering day, the most annoying phrase in the National Football League. But that's when it kicks in. They're going to get something done before March 13th?
I think so. Legal tampering day is really a combine when that starts, but that's all. But
illegal tampering.
Oh goodness! So they just happen to run into the cafe where they're bagels and stuff. Yeah, but I think they get something done earlier than later because you have to know how much money you're going to spend for a lot of these guys. Like I know they can free up space with, like, say if they restructure Darius and Slay. Yeah, he punched me for that. Not just kidding. But yeah, this comes with it. But when you restructure Slay and everybody else like that, and you add more room, but they need to. You can do all those other moves, but until you know how much you're spending, how you're structuring that Hurts deal, then that's when you can start to say, okay, I can resign this guy and restructure this guy's deal and stuff like that. You have to have that signed. I think they will get something signed because it's not. The only thing I can think that will hold it up, and is if the Hurts camp wants to see if Lamar Jackson's deal gets done before that, because that said that as
you got Joe Burrow, you got Justin Herbert. They better work fast if they can. At C. Franklin News, the great Chris Franklin, read him at nj.com, Lehigh Valley Live, Times of Trenton. He's all over the place. I'll leave you with this. For those paying attention, Howie did give you one little trickle of information. They're going to get some comp picks in 2024 because they're going to lose some free agents because they got too many. They got to pay Jalen. Who's most likely to go amongst the potential free agents?
Bradbury. And I say that because even though I think they want him back because we know their affinity for the shell I mean the defensive line, corners, and the safeties, and then linebackers inside. I think they want him back, but I think somebody's just going to back up the Brinks truck and say, hey, you know what? Hey, we want you here because we all seen this
league. Could be Arizona, by the way. Could be Arizona.
Hey, you love zone? Hey, you play zone? I love zone. Hey, come here. Thanks. Yeah, but I think when you look at an All-Pro, a guy who I think some teams will find that endearing the way he ended the season when he came talking to them in the locker room. They'll probably say he's a stand-up guy as well too. I think we got those traits as well too. That he brings to the field. I think that he's the one. I think he's, if not the top corner, the second corner that has taken and signed relatively quickly on that one too. So I think he's the first one that's gone. I think the Eagles are going to be back in the pool trying to find another corner. I personally, I would love to see them draft one. So that way you don't have to be in this every year and trying to hope you pick up the one veteran that you hope to just pair up with them. Because it's not every time it's not every year you get a Bradbury. Most time or not, you get Steven Nelson, guys like Steven Nelson or something like that. I know Patrick Peterson's out there. Yeah. Maybe you bring him in, but I think Bradbury is.
You're going to hear a lot of Zach McPherson, Josh Jobe talk at the
no Kerry Vincent. No,
Now, Gary's in the
that ship has sailed. Is that
Gary's in the XFL right now, so he can get.
I want Joey Porter. I want the team to draft if they can, if he's still available without having to move up. I want Joey Porter Jr. or Cam Smith. I think that would be.
Yeah, remember they have 2 first-round picks, so that's should be 2 starters if you do it right.
All right, last thing for me, Chris. And again, sorry, Eagle fans, but this is, I think, going to happen. Call it what you want. The tush push, the double cheek push. I think after the NFL decides to redo their rules during this offseason,
it's done.
With the competition
I've been
committee,
predicting that for months, Jody. It is over. No more tush push moving forward.
I think it should be called Hurts Too Good, with all apologies to John Mellencamp. It's the Eagles is the reason why they're going to take a rule that they allowed into the league 17 years ago and go back and go, yeah, we don't like that whole pushing thing. It's going to be because of the Eagles' success and Jalen Hurts' ability to just move a pile. How big a price are the Eagles going to pay for that? How big? It was a pretty damn important piece of their whole puzzle offensively this year. How bad are the Eagles going to get hurt if they decide to do away with the ability to push a guy from behind?
I don't think it's going to be that bad. I think you can do other things. I think you can motion them out, and when you motion them out, I think you can do different formational things and still have the same success in order to do that. So I'm not so worried about that as much. I think it's just I don't get why they're going to outlaw it. I can see the part where you worry about you had guys like God and everything just basically picking him up and like almost like body slamming him over the goal line to make sure that he got in there, or that you guys like basically or like the offensive line and basically picking him up, try to push him forward that way. But I don't understand the thing. I know the competition committee is the one that are probably going to put it forth. I wish they kept quiet. They stayed out, and you saw the teams try to put what teams actually put the resolution to say, hey, you know what, let's outlaw that, because I think it would add to the field fire if you had a team like the 49ers saying, the Cowboys or the 49ers come out saying, Philadelphia, no, you can't do that. And it's like that just adds a little bit more to the fire on that.
Whoever decided that this was, and like John said, both he and I, this isn't something that just came out of the blue. Oh, maybe we should do away with it. No, it's been quite obvious there was a loophole in the rules that certain teams were taking advantage of. No one more so than the Philadelphia Eagles. It was going to, at some point, they had to say, no, that this has gotten away from what we want football to be about. So it's going to happen. It doesn't matter who opted for it, who was a defendant of it. It was coming out, and I think we will see that this offseason. Speaking of offseason, we're going to continue to tap into you if that's okay, brother. You got, I know you're going to go on an extended vacation like Aaron Rodgers into the darkness somewhere. But after you come,
are you doing a darkness retreat, Chris?
Yeah. I don't have any shrooms. I don't have any acid or anything that's here. No, I'm working every day. No,
well, then we're gonna keep. If you're keeping working, we're keeping calling. We're gonna stream you up plenty during the off season. Thanks for coming on as regularly as you did during the season. Appreciate it, bud.
Hey guys, I appreciate the invite. It was always great talking to you guys. Thank you very much. No shrooms here. I'm sorry. FBI, I have no shrooms or acid. I don't have any of that stuff. Just said it. Sorry. Yeah.
Ayahuasca.
No shrooms, Franklin. That's what we're going to call you from now going forward. Chris Franklin here with us on Birds 365. All right, he's Johnny Mac. I'm Jody Mac. That makes us back and back. Birds 365. Les Bowen's going to join us now in less than 20 minutes. So you want to stay tuned for more Birds 365.
Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing, the The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Why do millions of people every year from around the world visit Philly's Rocky statue?
You want to tell me the sky is burgundy with green stripes and yellow polka dots? I'll meet you on that. But you're never going to convince me Rocky is anything other than the pure greatness that it is. Never going to happen.
Join me, Paul Farber, for WHYY's The Statue. We're going on a journey to explore the biography of the Rocky statue. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Post-game show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post-game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
You got your Mega Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with Young Birds 365. Day after we heard from both the head coach and the general manager after the disappointing / crushing loss against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And yeah, Howie Roseman looked crushed yesterday. He really did.
He really did.
You know him. You have noted here, as have I, that Howie actually features himself as a bit of a jokester, a comedian. He thinks
there were no jokes. Yeah,
he thinks he's funnier than he actually is. And nary an attempt at a joke yesterday. Not even a smile out of Howie yesterday. He was all business and all almost dour business, as a matter of fact. I'm okay with that. And I would think most Eagle fans are okay with that because, again, we get our basis of what we think the fan base is feeling and thinking and the like here on our stream on Birds 365. Appreciate all you guys who do stream in during the show. I do on my phone lines on WIP, do our social media and the like. It seems like Eagle Nation is having a tough time getting over this one. Seems like their general manager is having a tough time getting over this one. And as you noted earlier, Nick Sirianni has to be the optimistic guy that he is. And he was surely the optimistic of the two sitting up there on the stage yesterday. He looks like he's already gotten to a point of acceptance. I think Eagle fans will actually appreciate the way Howie Roseman seemed to still be in pain over that loss yesterday, John.
Well, they're fickle. They like Howie now, but it's not too long ago where he was, Jonathan Gannon level of hate. So he knows, better than most, how difficult it's going to be to replicate this performance, to be honest. And I've been talking about it for a while. This was a golden opportunity. I still say they were the better team. You and I disagree a little bit on that. I still say they were the better team than Kansas City. And that to me makes it more, from a personal standpoint, that to me makes it more disappointing because I think they were the better team. And they didn't find a way to win the game. And they, 24-14, I forget, I saw it somewhere. You might have seen it. There have not been many teams, Atlanta being the obvious one, that have had that kind of lead going into the second half
They're
and
the only
lost
team.
Super Bowls.
The
Oh,
Super
they're the
Bowl-
only team, was
Yeah,
it?
there's been one team, now two, that have blown a 10-point or more lead in after halftime. Eagles are only the second one.
I mean, that it was all, and they dominated that first half. I think I got lost in the sauce because the second half was so poor. Everyone's like, they're terrible, they're terrible. They dominated the first half of that game to the point, I freely admit, I thought the game was over. I said, well, Kansas City can't compete with this team. That's where I was at halftime. I thought it was over. It was a golden opportunity, and they didn't cash in. And I think that explains whether you want to call it depression or whatever you want to call Howie's mood. I think that's his belief.
Yeah, I'm more of a results-based guy. When the game's been played, unless there was some unbelievable lucky bounce, the teams play for 60 minutes, one beats the other, then I can't come out and go, yeah, but the team that lost was better. No. If you play the game
all the time, Jody. Happens all the time. We talked about that earlier in the week. There's there's obvious ones like the Patriots losing to the Giants, more obvious ones, but upsets happen every week. I did, but because I was very interested.
Yeah, but the Eagles were a 1.5 favorite, John.
No, I know it's much closer. I said
an upset would be a little bit of a stretch.
I said there's more obvious ones. There's more, and that's why I bring up the Patriots all the time, which is pretty obvious that they were a better team than the Giants. One game they weren't, and that's the only game that mattered. And so I was very interested to go to the PFF grades. Not that they're the be all end all, but I thought that they were going to grade the Eagles better than the Chiefs in the game, and they did. So they looked at the film, they looked at each individual play, and they graded the Eagles higher throughout, up and down, both sides of the football. Obviously, Jalen Hurts played a tremendous game. Jalen Hurts had the highest grade. You were talking to Brad Spielberger. You told me that. I didn't know that. Had the highest grade in Super Bowl history. Now, they've only been doing it for
rating.
Yeah,
yes.
They've only been doing it for how long? Oh, I thought you meant the Pro Football Focus grade.
No, the Pro Football Focus, but I'm saying just purely from a passer standpoint, because that takes the fumble out of the equation.
Gotcha.
I got to tell you, that's what I'm getting at, John. If you're going to use Pro Football Focus, you're not factoring in a fumble, pickup, scoop, and score. That's just one play,
that in,
but it had a massive effect on the outcome of the game. I'm guessing Kansas City. I have not looked at the ratings and rankings the way you have. Kansas City won the special teams matchup between the two, right? Well, 65-yard punt immediately to a touchdown is bigger than just one play.
No, look, the game, they lost the game. I mean, there's no debate over that. The Kansas City Chiefs are the world champions. I mean, I'm not debating that. I'm saying that I'm trying to look at him. 76.7 was the overall film grade for the Eagles. 70.5 for the Chiefs. So you have the 13 different categories. Offensively, obviously, not obviously, because the Chiefs were pretty good in the second half. Offensively, the Eagles got an 81.2. Chiefs got a 75.9. Passing, Jalen Hurts had the phenomenal game, 92.9. 92.9. Passing, 80.8 for the Chiefs. Pass blocking, Eagles much better. Receiving, Eagles were better. Running, Chiefs were obviously better. Run blocking was close, but the Chiefs were better. Defensively, obviously, the Chiefs were better, but just barely. Both teams were terrible. 60.9, 59.7 for the Eagles. Run defense, the Eagles were somehow better, which was probably the one you can disagree with the most. Tackling, the Eagles were better. Pass rushing, 64.1 to 53.7. The Chiefs won that. And think about that score. That's a disastrous, not score, film grade. That is a disastrous film grade for what had been the best pass rushing team in the NFL.
Correct.
And obviously special teams, the Chiefs were better. You know, they were the better team. I'm just saying that's my belief. Obviously, that's my belief. That's certainly Howie Roseman's belief. That's the belief in the NovaCare complex. Now, the Chiefs won the football game, but I'm saying that is why I think you see the incredible angst about the missed opportunity, because they think, they believe, and I agree with them. I freely admit that they were the better football team, but they didn't win the game.
Right. And that's kind of the only thing that matters. You can throw your fist up and go, hey, we believe we were the better football team. We're not having a parade, but we believe we're the better football. Who the hell cares? What does that get you?
That's fair. Now that's
20
fair.
more minutes of sleep at night. That's not
fair.
Cut it.
That's fair. But I'm saying, if coaches are looking at the film and saying, Jesus creeping Christ, we did this better. We did this better. We did this better. And we didn't win the football game. That drives you nuts.
Understood. But reverting back to the head coach, and he said it again yesterday in talking about if they were to go in a different direction with the defensive coordinator, core philosophies, core beliefs, turnovers, big plays. Those are the two things Nick Sirianni holds near and dear to his heart: turnovers and big plays. Two massive ones in a game, and they both went against the Eagles. The Jalen Hurts fumble, the 65-yard punt return. Now, punt return isn't, quote-unquote, a chunk offensive play, but it's a chunk play. It's a huge play, and they blew both of those. So they can't be too shocked that they lost the game when the two biggest plays both blew up in their face.
No, they're not. I mean, if he said it once, he said it 20 times this year. Between Nick Sirianni, add in Jonathan Gannon, and Shane Steichen, for people paying attention, they say it all the time. Turnovers, explosive plays. You win those two battles, you win the football game. They lost the turnover battle. They won the explosive play battle, but it doesn't matter because it was even enough. As I said yesterday on the show, if I gave everybody watching this show right now, Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for 182 yards, as long as pass play is going to be 22 yards. Every single one of them would have taken that. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them would have taken that. But they didn't win both categories. I mean, and the worst part is, Jalen Hurts was 16-1 as a starter coming into that game. He played his best game of the year. And I'm not exaggerating.
No.
He was unbelievable. And he had the one turnover. Which is so uncharacteristic. He's taking care of the football so well this season. And it's not only a turnover, it's six going the other way. It's a disaster. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes he plays at that level. He never turns the football over. I'm exaggerating. Obviously, he had 6 interceptions. That was his third fumble.
You need to put the word only in front of 6. Yeah. Only 6 interceptions all season.
Well, that's what I'm saying. How well he's taking care of the football game. How well he's taking care of the football, and he's playing his best football ever. And you have that one play. I understand why Howie Roseman is depressed, is all I'm trying to say.
All right, so then I put this question to you, and if Howie were on the line, I'd put it to him as well, as depressed as he might have been yesterday. Super Bowl window closed?
No, because, you still have a very young quarterback who's playing at an extremely high level and should only get better. We talk about his ceiling. There's no reason to think he can't get better. I will say it's going to be more difficult. You're not going to have a season like you had this year. That ain't happening. Where you're the best team in football almost from start to finish. Where you're 16-1 when the starting quarterback is on the field. When you have a top 5 offense, a top 5 defense, that ain't happening again. 70 sacks, that ain't happening. You got to go about it a different way, but they're in the conversation of being one of the best teams. It's just going to be more difficult.
I agree with you there because some who are subscribing to the theory that you're subscribing, oh, we had it. It was there. It was a taken. We were the better team. All those angles to look at it. And then you don't. Well, then it fritters away. That you missed out on your opportunity to win a championship. I don't believe they'll win those close at all. As long as you've got your good young head coach in place, what they do, your good young quarterback in place that you do, a significant chunk of your offensive line. Now, here's where it's going to be a key. Is Jason Kelce coming back? I'm a big Isaac Seumalo fan. I'm going to be bummed when he leaves. I think that you're right. We've been saying here, somebody's going to pay him. Somebody's going to pay him big bucks. Probably more than the Eagles are going to be able to afford to with all the other roster moves they have to make. They're probably going to go elsewhere. I think we'll find out a little bit. Sometimes, as good as Stoutland is, and I'm as big a Stoutland guy as anybody else, Stoutland University, the whole plug and play thing, good luck getting somebody as good as Isaac Seumalo. They might get close, but I don't think they're going to be able to just replace him. You better hope that Jason Kelce comes back. Because if Juergens is going to be your guy, and you're going to play him either at right guard and or center, he can't play both. And if you're dropping down another notch to replace Isaac because Juergens has got to stay at center because Kelce decides to walk away, then I think that could be pretty significant. That could
here's where one thing Jason's not going to leave the Eagles wondering. He's going to let them know what it is so they can plan if he's coming back. If he's not coming back, they're probably going to re-sign Isaac. They're going to have the money to re-sign Isaac if Jason Kelce comes back, doesn't come back. So in that instance, I don't think you're going to have to replace both. I think, Cam's going to either play center or he's going to play right guard next year. I don't think you're going to have to replace both because Jason Kelce will let them know so they can plan. And if he's not coming back, I think they'll re-sign Isaac. Okay. If he is coming back, I don't think they can re-sign Isaac. It's too much.
That makes a lot of sense, and I hope you're right on that. But let me ask you a question. If they prioritize, and again, this is my speculation, nobody else's. Well, I shouldn't say nobody else's. Some people I've seen and heard get on the record and say he's the number one priority. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is the guy that they're going to, after Jalen, of course, in a contract suspension. That's not a free agent. That's just a contract that needs to get done. I would think that Chauncey is the guy that they would put on the top of their priority list to get re-signed. Number 2 for me would either be Isaac or Bradbury. If they need to re-sign, they can only re-sign one of the two. Which one do you think they'd prioritize?
Boy, I don't
assuming
assuming Kelce gets back.
Yes.
Assuming Kelce's back, I would think Bradbury, but in that end, I don't think they're getting either. I don't think Bradbury's coming back. I don't think Isaac's coming back if Jason is playing. And I go back to how he admitted one of the things for people paying attention. Oh, we're going to have some comp picks because he knows certain guys are he can't do it. And Bradbury's going to get a big chunk of money.
And whenever anybody mentions comp picks, who do you immediately think of?
Oh, that's Jimmy Kempski.
Jimmy Kempski, Mr. Comp Pick himself.
It's going to be a big offseason.
I was in the car driving at the time, and we're going to have comp picks. Boom.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of Jimmy Kempski.
Yeah, that's Jimmy's brand, comp picks.
It sure is. And we'll get Kempski up next week. He owes us. We'll get him up next week. I'll tell you who's coming up next. Our buddy Les Bowen, longtime Eagles beat reporter, as we continue to talk about almost a week now of Eagle pain after loss in the Super Bowl. We haven't had Les on to give us his thought on why the Eagles didn't walk away with another Lombardi trophy. He will next here on Birds 365.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Go for the beers, go for the cheers, go for the hit and the hits, go for the scene, go for the screens, go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
Jeff D'Ambrosio doesn't need a special event to appreciate his customers. Jeff shows his appreciation to them every day of the year. Jeff makes sure to stock more new inventory than anyone and guarantees prices and payments that nobody can beat. There are so many reasons that thousands of customers know Jeff is the easy, friendly place to do business. More for their trades. No judgment zone for credit issues. The best, most reliable service department in the country. That's why I like Jeff, and I know you will too. Jeff will satisfy you every day. Jeff D'Ambrosio, Destination Downingtown, Owner Appreciation Event.
Post-game show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post-game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
Why do millions of people every year from around the world visit Philly's Rocky statue?
You want to tell me the sky is burgundy with green stripes and yellow polka dots? I'll meet you on that. But you're never going to convince me Rocky is anything other than the pure greatness that it is. Never going to happen.
Join me, Paul Farber, for WHYY's The Statue. We're going on a journey to explore the biography of the Rocky statue. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
We are the Mac guys here on Birds 365. McMullen and McDonald. We're going to spend the next 20, 25 minutes talking about the Birds with the guy who's only been covering them for decades. Our buddy Les Bowen jumps in with us here on Birds 365. Les, as soon as the Super Bowl ended and the Eagles had come up short, Harrison Butker kicked the field goal. If you had to wait till after they ran that last attempted Hail Mary, which didn't get anywhere near being a prayer answered, what was the first thought that came into your mind?
Just that it was a huge opportunity missed. And maybe my perceptions are colored by the things that I've covered in the past, the McNabb era Eagles, the Lindros era Flyers before that. You know, I've just seen too much of this. You know, I knew everyone was going to say, well, Jalen Hurts is 24 and you know, Sirianni's young and they've got this and they've got that, and they're going to be a competitive team going forward. And they are, but I've never seen a situation where this really worked out. And I know it has in other cities, you know, but I just, whenever a team gets there and doesn't win it with a young cast, I'm always like, oh boy, you know, this And we all know, you guys were talking before I came on about the free agents, that are going to leave.
Yeah.
It's going to be
Howie
really
admitted that,
hard,
by the way. Yeah.
really hard to reassemble a cast as good as the one they had Sunday. And they had a better roster, slightly better than the Kansas City Chiefs had. And they had a 10-point lead going into the third quarter. And I've just never seen a defense out-schemed that badly. To say that they didn't get a stop doesn't even begin to cover it. I mean, they didn't come close to getting a stop. It was, when you talk about Patrick Mahomes beating them, you're thinking, okay, he must have thrown like a pass sidearm while being tackled by 3 people, 40 yards, through the air. Who can possibly? He didn't have to do anything like that. He just stood there.
His longest pass play,
wide open.
I can't get over it. He threw for 182 yards. His longest pass play was 22 yards. If I said that before the game, everybody's signing up. Everybody's signing up.
But they ran the ball through giant holes in the Eagles line. And I was just so, you and I have disagreed, John, about Jonathan Gannon. I've kind of been on your side some. I mean, there have been times when the criticism has been ridiculous. I'm not one of these people who thinks it's 1990 and you can play Buddy Ryan's defense and, blitz every play and that works. That doesn't work. But what happened in the second half there just can't happen. It wasn't a matter of Kansas City having all these great players like Juju Smith-Schuster. It was a matter of just not being able to figure out what they were doing and how to counter it. And that was
4
stunning.
possessions, and the only reason there wasn't 4 touchdowns is because Jerick McKinnon's a very savvy player. Otherwise, it would have been 4 for 4. So, look, Jonathan Gannon deserves a whole heap of criticism for that second half collapse. I do think there's some personnel issues in there. One of the things, Les, I find interesting is, everybody uses that term adjustments. And it drives me crazy because they don't tell you. They say, oh, you got to make adjustments. I don't want to hear that. What are the adjustments that you want them to make? My issue, I kind of turn it a 180. The Eagles played more man coverage than they have all season. They're blitzing. One of the not the most, but one of the most blitz heavy games they've had all season. Why? That's my problem. Like, why are you going away from what made you the number 2 defense in the NFL with the number 1 pass defense? Why? Because you have the extra week? Are you that spooked by Andy Reid to say, I got to do something different? That's my biggest criticism.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. I don't really know. To me, it was more the fact that they couldn't handle motion.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
Fake motion, real motion. Yeah. And I wonder if that doesn't and apparently this was a problem at various points during the season. I don't really chart the X's and O's that closely, especially now that I'm retired and I don't have to do things like that. But it just the fact that their offense doesn't use a lot of motion.
I said that too. They never practice against it. They never use motion. Yeah.
This bothers me a little. I think maybe they need to do that. Because that's certainly, it's a magic word in the league right now. It's something good offenses do. The Eagles have a very good offense, but they don't do a lot of it. And, I would love to see a defense that could handle motion and not get flummoxed or lose assignments or, screw things up out of that. And maybe John, maybe the fact that they didn't play a whole lot of man during the season was why they couldn't play it effectively in the Super Bowl.
I think that's probably right. So I don't know why you make that shift on the biggest stage. It was perplexing to me, to say the least.
Well, maybe because Kansas City, you play a lot of zone because you don't want to beat over top, right?
Yeah.
Kansas City didn't do that all year, and they certainly didn't do it Sunday. They were right about that. I mean, that now that Tyreek Hill is gone, Kansas City just doesn't do that. So,
yeah,
maybe that was his thinking, but it didn't work, whatever he did. And it really galls me, guys, that Jonathan Gannon is never going to have to account for this. He's never going to have to explain anything. He went out to Arizona. He stayed in Arizona, excuse me. They had a press conference yesterday, and I didn't expect a lot out of that because nobody in Arizona cares what happened to the Eagles.
No.
They want to know about what he's going to do with Kyler Murray. And, and he came off very well. He came off as a, really energetic, square-jawed, we're going to get this done, just watch us go kind of guy. But what happened in the second half of the Super Bowl? I mean, there was just no.
It would have been nice, I will say, you're right. I mean, he should have talked. But I still haven't talked to Jim Schwartz about Super Bowl 52, and they won that game.
Yeah. But that's a little less. The fact that they won makes it less pressing, I mean.
Yes.
But let me ask both you guys a question. Either one of you say since Sunday, and why haven't we had the chance to talk to Shane Steichen? People bring up Jonathan Gannon, and no one mentioned Shane Steichen, who, by the way, hasn't talked to the Philadelphia media since the game was over as well. Is it just because the offense played as well as
the
it
offense
did?
played well. That's why.
Yeah, so we only care about
about
tearing somebody down instead of propping somebody up. Is that what
yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah.
The difference is, Jody, that everybody knows it's Nick Sirianni's offense, and you can talk to Nick Sirianni.
Apparently, the Colts don't, since they handed Shane Steichen their head coaching job.
Well, that's always the question with an offensive coordinator. But I think Shane Steichen's a smart guy, but you can ask Nick offensive questions and get them answered in a.
Okay.
And by the way, Nick answered defensive questions as well yesterday, so I give him credit.
But he didn't really. That press conference also was frustrating to me in that you got a question. I think it might have been from Elliott about, okay, what happened in the second half, and Nick's answer was, well, the first half we controlled the ball and they didn't convert third downs, and in the second half they controlled the ball and they did convert third downs.
Yeah.
Well, no kidding. I mean, we all watched the game. Why?
That wasn't deep analysis there out of the coach list. Is that what you're saying?
And nobody says, okay, well, hold on here, Nick. What were the reasons for that? Instead, the next question is, how about the slippery turf? And I'm not criticizing reporters because I've been in that situation many times, and the way the Eagles handle it, there's like 30 people there and they're all yelling their questions.
Yeah.
And you just pick out whoever, yells the loudest. And that deal yesterday should have been 10 minutes on the Super Bowl. Then we're going to have questions about the coordinators and the offseason and Hurts and all that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a give and take, as Les, but there's too many reporters, too much shouting. But you don't want the microphones either, because then it becomes too structured. You can't have follow-ups. So it's a give and take, and it gets difficult at times. It gets bogged down. But I do give Howie credit for not playing into the turf. I mean, he shut that down. He's like, both teams played on the turf. So one thing, and James Bradbury too, stand-up guy.
Mm-hmm.
Look, to me, it was over when James Bradbury said, yeah, I held him. I was hoping I could get away with it. It's over for me. Why do you think people hold on to the field and the penalties so much when the Eagles?
Because it was such a close game, and so little tiny things meant so much. And the field thing did affect the Eagles more than the Chiefs.
I agree with that.
I keep seeing all these. It really, Andrew Wiley, this guy that plays right tackle for the Chiefs. People have been posting stuff on Twitter and Instagram about the wonderful job he did, and they post these clips. And in every clip, Hassan Reddick is falling down, and Andrew Wiley is pouncing on top of him. Oh yeah, wow, what a block! It's, but there's nothing you can do about it. I think that's Howie's
Yeah.
You know,
it probably gets
it's not
fined
like
too. Probably
if
get
something
fined.
happens during the game that's a problem with a rule, then you can go to the league and say, okay, at the league meetings, we're going to press for changing this rule. Well, the NFL doesn't want to have crappy fields in the Super Bowl. There's no issue there.
Evidently, they don't give a flying, you know what, because they.
Well,
had
I
a
think they
crappy
just
field.
didn't mean for this to be the case. I don't think they don't care. I think they thought they had a good field. The Super Bowl isn't going to be there next year. You know, I mean, there's just nothing to address going forward that's going to move this in any way.
Actually, there are 2 stadiums that had that same turf system, and State Farm Stadium is obviously one of them. And by the way, it's been a problem for years. The other one is Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, and that's where
the Super Bowl is next year. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I just think you can't go anywhere with that. You can go somewhere like the year that I was actually covering that NFC Championship game where the Saints guy got clobbered, by the Rams guy before the pass got there. That you address with the league. The field, I don't think there's anything left for you to address, so you might as well move on. But the Bradbury thing, you mentioned that. You're right, but we all know how many penalties were called in that game, and that only 2 of them were not procedure pre-snap penalties. And that was one. And it was not anything. If you can watch that in non-slow-mo, live action, and you still can't tell in any way how Juju Smith-Schuster is impeded from running his route. He tugged on his shirt, but it didn't.
Well, that to me is it though, because that's what officials call when they see that jersey come out. That's when the flag comes out.
Yeah.
So that, from my standpoint, I didn't even. I was over that in like 10 seconds. I'm like, all right.
Well,
the jersey.
I think Les is with me on this one because of the way he just stated it. The reason why I had a problem with the call was there needs to be a little evaluation and just call. It can't be so black and white, yay or nay. If a jersey comes away from the uniform, it's a foul. No, if it doesn't hurt the player's ability to make the play, then with 2 minutes to go in a game that you haven't called a pass interference or a holding or anything all game, and you've set the bar as to what an actual hold is. Now it's not the time to be calling
the last thing I want, guys, is more subjectivity on these officials' plates. I mean, that's
but they do use that standard, John. They do use that standard. You see it when we're listening to these the retired officials explain calls every Sunday. You get this, especially when there's hand fighting downfield, and you'll watch a replay, and both guys are pushing each other and arm barring each other, and finally the ball gets there, and the explanation for the no call is, well, the receiver wasn't impeded in making the catch. Well, the other guy's hands were all over him, but he kind of fought back, so therefore it's no harm, no foul.
Well, I mean, I'm with you, Les. I mean, they make mistakes all the time. That's my general policy, and Jody knows. I don't complain about officiating because they're going to make mistakes. There's, one of the biggest cliches, and Les, you probably heard it a million times over the years, control what you can control. How many coaches say that? How many players say that? I can't complain about officiating because it's baked in. I mean, sometimes you're going to get screwed. Sometimes you're going to get a play that works for you. I understand it's a big spot, but for that particular play, and again, when James Bradbury says it himself, all right, case closed to me. I mean,
but here's the thing with James Bradbury, and I'd love to be able to talk to him now that, several days have passed. So you have this situation, 3rd and 8, minute 40 something left, right? Mm-hmm. If he doesn't tug the guy's jersey, one of 2 things is going to happen. The ball goes to the end zone. So Juju Smith-Schuster isn't falling down on the 1-yard line. He's going to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
So the Eagles get the ball back with a chance to tie with a minute 40 something seconds left. Yeah. Or, and I think this is what would have happened, the ball is overthrown and it's an incomplete pass, and the Eagles get the ball back with 1:40 something left and a chance to win the game.
Yeah.
The only thing that can end the game at that point is him taking a penalty.
Yeah. And by the way, he's one of the savviest players you're ever going to see.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. It's a tough break. There's no doubt about that. And that's why, look, we've been joking about this for a couple of days now. The Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model of 5 stages of grief. Yeah. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Howie looked awfully depressed to me yesterday. You know Howie. He always likes to crack jokes. Right. They don't land. But he always tries, God bless him. Nothing yesterday, man. He understood the opportunity that was there.
Yeah.
I think he understands how difficult what you were talking about, how difficult. They might be a Super Bowl contender next year. They're not going to be this good. Right. They're not going to be what they were this season.
And you just look at the history of teams in this game. You know, Kansas City, everyone is calling Kansas City a dynasty now. Well, Kansas City won the Super Bowl, what was it, 4 years ago? And 3 years ago, I'm sorry. And took 2 years to get back. You know, after that, they didn't come back last year. They weren't there last year. Cincinnati was there last year.
Yeah.
And Cincinnati thought it would get back, and should have probably actually was going to win that game, I think, against Kansas City until Asai pushed Patrick Mahomes out of bounds. It's just, there's so much that has to happen to get you back into that game. You can be plenty good. I'm not saying the Eagles are going to be a terrible team next year, although I saw that happen in 2005 for a lot of reasons. But, you know, the Eagles can be a very, very good team next year and still not get to the Super Bowl, still not have as many people healthy, still not have, you know, Jalen Hurts, even with his shoulder, play one of the better games in the history of the Super Bowl. You know, I mean, it's that's why it's hard to get through this. You know, I think for Eagles fans is that so much lined up for them. It was right there. They were 30 minutes away, you know, from doing this.
And by the way, I don't know where you were, Les, in the stadium. I thought that game was over. I thought that the Eagles were just better. That was my thought process at halftime. I'm like, well, this team can't play with the Eagles. That was my thought process.
I was a little concerned because the weird thing about the defensive touchdown meant the Eagles had the ball for a long time and Mahomes didn't. And that skewed things just a little bit. But the defense was able to get a stop or two in the first half. And I just thought the Eagles' offense was so dominant that, you know, the Chiefs had screwed it up. They were down 10 points and they weren't going to make that up. And that's, you know, the offense doesn't get a lot of criticism because they scored so much, but it was so much harder for the Eagles to score than it was the Chiefs in that game. You know, the 17-play field goal drive. You know, what the hell was that?
That's painful. I do want to ask you this, because I brought this up on WIP on Monday night, and you knew better than I do because you were with them every single day. The 2004 into 2005 Eagles 2-year run. They go from being in the Super Bowl down in Jacksonville against the Patriots, had a chance. T.O. comes back out of the chamber to have a big game, and Donovan may or may not have puked on the field. We all remember the story. But then 2005 happened, and they went from being in the Super Bowl to out of the playoffs completely. What lesson can Nick Sirianni get? And what was the word yesterday that he didn't buy into about from the Super Bowl? Somebody asked a specific question, and he wouldn't answer, and I can't remember the word that the questioner used about description. What lesson? It was a lesson. What was the word? Help me out here, John.
I don't know where you're going. I would if I could.
Hey, is someone hungry? You know,
scarred? Are you going?
No, scarred was my description for Howie. But somebody asked a specific. Never mind.
Super Bowl hangover? Telling us that?
No, that's not where I'm going. What? All right. So here, and again, I apologize, Les. What lesson can Nick Sirianni, if he went back, talk to Les Bowen and Andy Reid and everybody else who was part of that team, Donovan McNabb, the lesson from going from Super Bowl contender to out of the playoffs, what happened to that team that the Eagles have to avoid that happening again this year after a Super Bowl loss?
Well, the biggest thing that happened to that team was T.O., and I don't think that's going to happen.
Nobody's going down the T.O. road with this group.
Nobody.
No, not at all. Everything, but there were other problems there. That was a different situation with that team. You had, and I won't belabor this too much, you had a defense that was kind of at its peak in 2004. Some guys were getting old, and the defense had actually been better a couple years earlier, but the offense wasn't ready to get them to the Super Bowl. And finally, they got enough of an offense, and McNabb was mature enough to get them to a Super Bowl. But right after that, the defense kind of started to really struggle, and injuries and the whole TO thing blew up. And they just didn't have, they didn't have what this team has, I don't think. Though they did, they had to really, when they got back to the NFC Championship game after the 2008 season, by then they had Deshaun Jackson. Brian Westbrook was at his peak by then. They really had to kind of reload and recalibrate and find some new guys like Trent Cole and, people like that. I don't think this team, although there will be some holes with free agency, I don't think this team is as close to the end of the line as that one was. That was the end of a 4-year run of making it to the NFC Championship game.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very different situation. The one thing I'll say that Nick needs to know is everything starts to happen real fast after this because you played so much longer than you usually do.
Yeah.
The spring stuff is going to come before guys are ready. Training camp is going to seem like it's
10
early.
stinking days. Yeah, I mean,
and you might not have, last year they got off to such an incredible start. And I don't think that's really crucial. A lot of teams don't get off to, you don't have to be 12-0. The important thing is how you finish. Kansas City didn't get off to a 12-0 start this season. I think they might be a little muddled early in the year and people still trying to process things. And, I think it's not going to be like this year. Training camp isn't going to be like, we're going to really show everybody this year. And if he tries to establish that tone, I don't think it's a good tone. I think it has to be, okay, we're building our way back. We're trying to get ourselves up off the mat. I don't think it's as chipper and as, where everything's new and wonderful as it was last year.
The word I was trying to think of was wisdom. Somebody asked Nick what wisdom he's going to take from the Super Bowl loss.
I didn't know
and he wasn't buying into wisdom, and nor was I. So thank you for that.
Which that kind of disappointed me because I really think they could have used. I thought Andy used his 2 weeks better than the Eagles used their 2 weeks. Frankly,
Andy always uses his 2 weeks, the extra week better. But
Nick's answer about we can't go back and review everything about that Jacksonville play. What the hell? I mean, you can. That's what you do. That's how you win these games is by finding stuff like that.
You could find stuff, but to be fair, I mean, the Eagles run the same plays all the time, and people can't stop them offensively. I mean, just because you see a play once doesn't mean you're going to be able to stop it again. But they should have done a better job. Now, one thing I'll end it here with you at Les Bowen. Follow Les on Twitter. You were through the attrition of the coaching staff with Andy. That 99 coaching staff of Andy Reid's is unbelievable. How many different head coaches ultimately came off that staff? You know how hard all of a sudden you lose guys. I know most fans don't care about Jonathan Gannon. That's fine. Shane Steichen. It was interesting, you and I knew, most people knew that Jonathan Gannon was in place before Nick Sirianni. Nick admitted Shane was in place before Nick Sirianni yesterday, which I had no idea.
No.
Point is, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman like to get involved with the head coaching, with the coaching staff.
We saw Doug Peterson leave over that
exactly.
issue.
Has that become a problem at some point? Because Nick certainly sounded like a guy who I think he mentioned the word in-house 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. Very good point, John. I think Nick was clearly signaling that he has in-house people he wants to promote. And we'll see if that happens. These are huge decisions. I don't think losing either Shane Steichen or Jonathan Gannon necessarily dooms the Eagles or causes a huge disruption in anything, but you really do have to replace them with very good people. And we all felt like in 2017, there was a lot of back and forth about how much it meant that Frank Reich and John DeFilippo left, but it meant something. I mean, it changed the juju, it really, and they've got to really do this right. I think Brian Johnson is the obvious right answer at offensive coordinator. Defensive coordinator, I don't know. Denard Wilson, everybody likes him, but when your defensive backs don't know how to hand off, motion, is he really a great guy? I don't know. I certainly wouldn't bring in anybody defensively who's going to totally change the scheme, because they drafted players and signed players to play this scheme. I think that would be a very hard thing to do. But this is if Howie and Jeffrey are going to tell Shane, tell Nick, that we've got to have this guy or that guy, I think that's going to be a real problem. I don't see that happening. I think my idea of the Howie Nick relationship is that they are just very, very tight, more so than has ever been the case here with Howie and a head coach. And I think they'll work this out in a way that they're both really happy with. But that is a tendency. You're right, John. That is something that has come up in the past and, certainly could be at play soon.
Les, as always, we appreciate whenever you jump aboard. Thanks for getting up with us early today. It looks like you've gotten to the final stage of grief acceptance. So we're glad for that. No frustration out of you like Howie Roseman yesterday. Thanks for jumping in with us this morning.
Very good to be here. Thank you, guys.
Our pleasure. Les Bone, we're going to continue to punch him up because he's got as good a grasp on the 2022, now 2023 Eagles, and also the history of the Eagles as anybody here in town. All right, he's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. You know what we're going to do. Come back. Put a bow on the show. Stay here.
Post-game show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post-game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
Why do millions of people every year from around the world visit Philly's Rocky statue?
You want to tell me the sky is burgundy with green stripes and yellow polka dots? I'll meet you on that. But you're never going to convince me Rocky is anything other than the pure greatness that it is. Never going to happen.
Join me, Paul Farber, for WHYY's The Statue. We're going on a journey to explore the biography of the Rocky statue. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
All right, running out of the time in this non-football Friday edition of Birds 365. Johnny Mac and I will be back on Monday. So I was thinking about what can happen over this weekend during the 48 hours that we're not with you guys. Not a whole hell of a lot. I don't think that there's going to be an official appointment of either their offensive coordinator or defense coordinator. It's leaked out they want to meet with Vance Joseph, the former Bronco head coach and now Cardinal DC, who is getting interviewed by Sean Payton as a defense coordinator in Denver. They're going to supposedly bring him in and talk to him as well outside the organization, Rooney Rule and the like. Who are they going to bring in from outside to talk about the offensive coordinator position? One that there's massive speculation that it's a done deal. It's going to be Brian Johnson anyway.
Yeah.
So who comes in for that all-important, dress it up, make it look good interview for Rooney Rule purposes?
No idea, because as I said, Jody, there are going to be guys who say, you know what, we know Brian's getting the job. I'm not going to waste my time. Now, there are it's going to be probably younger off the radar name that just wants to get his name out there, that he got an offensive coordinator interview. That's my guess, the way it's going to go. And we might hear that name leak out over the weekend. But I don't think it's going to be, Eric Bieniemy's going to get the Washington job. People are saying, well, go get Eric Bieniemy, go interview. No, Eric Bieniemy wouldn't have come here because he knows, he's not in a position. So it's going to be, to me, it's going to be an unknown name, a lesser name that doesn't get a ton of interviews. And maybe it helps him just to get his name out there. But the defensive coordinator is more interesting. I think there might be more names that the Eagles take a look at it, because they got to get that one right. I mean, Les is right. This is Nick Sirianni's offense, no matter who's running it. So there's some constant there. Jonathan Gannon, for better or for worse, most Eagles fans worse. That was his beatdom, man. Defense was his. When you have an offensive head coach, the defensive coordinator is the next most important person. Even if you're not calling the plays, he's still the next most important person because you don't have the expertise on that side of the football. So that's it. That's a decision the Eagles have to get right.
And I think it's ironic that you threw Bieniemy's name out there to make your point, because there is a fine line. There's like a cutting edge of interviewing for positions. You want to get your name out there. That's a good thing. You want the experience of doing it. So if you don't get the gig, the next time you do it, you're a little bit better prepared for that type interview. But at some point, there's a tipping point, and then you become the guy who interviews all the time and never gets the gig.
Yeah.
Then that throws up some red flags and some question marks. And that, unfortunately, has been Eric Bieniemy's history. This is a different one for an offense coordinator rather than a head coach, but still, interviewing is interviewing. It'd be real interesting to see who that young, unknown guy is, because that's the one thing I think can happen over the weekend. The name will leak out of who the Eagles might interview, who's not Brian Johnson, that they'll bring in. They'll glad hand. They'll pick his brain. They'll let him go. They'll say, you're in the mix. And then they'll turn around and hire Brian Johnson anyway. So that will be, but I don't think that's till next week. When, yes, John McMullen and Jody McDonald will both be back here start to look ahead toward the combine. Johnny mentioned how many days, like 10 or 11 till the combine?
Yeah, man. I got to start getting in the draft. I got to, when the team you cover makes the Super Bowl, you're way behind.
You're running behind. And the team is, the people who cover the team, everybody is a little behind. We'll be playing catch up, and we'll do some draft stuff next week. That's for sure. With the combine coming up, John McMullen and Jody McDonald will be back here Monday in 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.